Hey!
Did you know that in the original Little Mermaid, Ursula cuts out Ariel's tongue? And then Ariel is forced to, shall we say, unalive Prince Eric? The Little Mermaid is based on a tale that is way, way darker. So get your popcorn and don't be afraid to hover your finger over that mute button. We've got the story that inspired the Little Mermaid, and things are about to get spooky under the sea.
Don't be scared.
Even Sebastian can't save you now. Number 1. Ariel was certainly unhappy at parts of The Little Mermaid, and for good reason. Yet in the original version, she was downright depressed. This version of the story was written by Hans Christian Andersen and came out way back in 1837. Like in the Disney version, in the original version, The Little Mermaid manages to save the human prince's life when he nearly drowns. But when no one knows that she was the one who did it, and she isn't recognized and can't communicate with the prince, she falls into a deep depression. Number 2. Back in The Little Mermaid's first iteration, the titular aquatic creature didn't have the name we now know her by.
Ariel?
In fact, she had no name at all. Sure, one could argue that her name wasn't important to the story, or that there was another literary reason to refer to this character simply as what she is, a little mermaid. Yet, with a plot about a woman whose ability to speak is taken from her, there's a certain dark undertone about what her lack of name means about her lack of power and ownership over her life that we really don't think we should ignore.
That's right.
You know what else you shouldn't ignore? All the other amazing videos on the Things Animated. Like and subscribe for plenty more videos like this one.
Have we got a deal?
Number 3. Now, back to the question at hand. Are mermaids immortal? When it comes to mythical creatures, there are always different variations, legends with different details, and debatable aspects of lore. For example, Lord knows Dracula fans don't believe that vampires sparkle in the sun. As for the OG Little Mermaid, however, the mermaid lore is a bit gruesome. In this story, mermaids live to be about 300 years old, and then they turn to seafoam. That's a pretty rough fate. And Ariel, Nameless Mermaid, agrees that this is pretty scary, which makes her commit even harder to getting her wish. Surprisingly, the whole seafoam thing isn't actually the worst part of being a mermaid in this story. Number 4. As the story goes, mermaids have no souls. Oh, so that's why Ariel's a redhead. Just kidding. The Little Mermaid has a grandmother, a character who's cut from the Disney version. We'll come back to that later. The Little Mermaid's grandmother answers a lot of her curious granddaughter's questions. When she asks her grandmother about whether humans die like mermaids do, she says that they live shorter lives than mermaids, but when mermaids die, that's it. There's no afterlife, there's no heaven, there's just a bunch of seafoam. Ever heard of sugarcoating things a bit there, Grandma? Number 5. As you can see, there's actually more incentive for the original Little Mermaid to want to become a human, because of the aforementioned seafoam thing, so we kinda get why she went for it. Kinda. But it turns out that the deal was actually worse in this version. In the version of The Little Mermaid that we're used to, Ariel understandably finds walking to be pretty difficult at first. In the original, however, part of the deal was that the Little Mermaid would be very graceful when she got her legs. Well, that's great. But as with everything in the spooky, scary version of The Little Mermaid, there's a pretty sizable catch.
I might be willing to make an exchange.
In this case, the catch is that walking would be extremely painful for the Little Mermaid. The Sea Witch's exact quote is, "Every step you take will feel as if you are treading upon knife blades so sharp that blood must flow."
But you'll have your man.
Sheesh. She's harsh. Number 6. And she only gets harsher.
Oh, and there is one more thing.
We all remember that in exchange for the ability to walk, Ursula magically takes away Ariel's voice. However, the original Sea Witch took things a bit more literally. She actually violently cut out Ariel's tongue.
No more talking, singing, zip.
This deal is sounding worse and worse by the second. Number 7. And it gets even worse when we discover that the original Prince Eric wasn't actually such a good catch. No pun intended. For starters, his favorite hobby is watching enslaved women dance. Yikes. But the Little Mermaid doesn't seem too upset by this. She even joins them to try to get his attention.
I was just trying to have some fun.
Furthermore, he refers to the mermaid as "my dear little foundling," and is kind enough to allow her to sleep outside his bedroom door. Yeah, that's sarcasm if you couldn't tell. This kind of treatment sure isn't worth losing your tongue over.
He is quite a catch, isn't he?
Number 8. There's just one more thing that makes the deal even worse. According to the deal, if the prince decides to marry someone else, the Little Mermaid will turn into seafoam on the morning of his wedding day.
This is a catastrophe!
Surprising to no 1, the jerk prince decides to marry someone else because he thinks that she is the one who saved his life when in reality it was the mermaid. Number 9. The original Little Mermaid had older sisters who were sirens. This means that they were mermaids who sang to lure in sailors and drown them. According to the story, the titular mermaid actually had an even more beautiful voice than her sisters, before her tongue got cut out, that is, but she didn't use it to commit any atrocities. Good for her. Number 10. If you think that the Little Mermaid's Siren Sisters are probably going to cause more trouble in this story, you had the right idea. On the morning of the prince's wedding, the sisters visit the Little Mermaid with, wait for it, a dagger. They've made a new deal with the sea witch, and rather than simply turning to seafoam as punishment for her heartbreak, she can kill the prince and go back to her normal mermaid life.
One less human to worry about.
But she says she can't bring herself to do it and accepts her seafoamy fate.
She really does love him.
Luckily, King Neptune himself appears and tells her that her kindness can earn her a soul and will give her a chance to make it to heaven, after living the rest of her life as a mermaid, that is.
You could go home with all the normal fish and just be miserable for the rest of your life.
Number 11. So that's kind of hopeful, maybe? But it's still an unhappy ending of sorts, since the prince never realizes the truth about who saved his life and doesn't pay attention to the Little Mermaid for long enough to notice that something is really wrong.
You haven't noticed.
Plus, she has to actually attend the wedding of the man she loves to a woman he's confused with her. No wonder Disney changed this story. Number 12. Disney made one change in particular that is interesting. Remember the Little Mermaid's grandmother that we mentioned? Well, in the original story, the grandmother helped the Little Mermaid cope with the loss of her mother. The grandmother didn't make it into the version of the story that we've all seen, which makes sense, since she existed mainly to deliver pretty dark truths about mortality. Interestingly though, many folks think that Sebastian was a character who was created as a stand-in for the Little Mermaid's grandmother, who of course is a lot more upbeat.
Don't you shake your head at me, young lady.
Number 13. So we're not really wondering why Disney made the tweaks to this story that they did. It's pretty obvious. But like us, you may now be wondering, why would someone write such a depressing fairy tale in the first place? The answer to that question is pretty interesting too. Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Little Mermaid after the wedding of his friend Edvard Cullen. Andersen had written love letters to Cullen, but it seemed that Cullen didn't have the same feelings in return. So, art imitates life in this story about someone sacrificing everything for the man they love, only to lose him to someone else in the end. Somehow, the inspiration for this story is even sadder than the story itself. You really outdid yourself there, Hans.
So long, love boy.
Ariel!
Can you believe how wild this story got? What was your favorite part? Do you think there's anything they should have left in the Disney version?
It could be fun.
We've got to talk about it in the comments. And for more videos like this one, like and subscribe to The Things Animated.